Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Welcome, girls, to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's fitness mindset and body image online coach. Today, I'm chatting with Evelyn. Evelyn is a nutritionist and a wellbeing specialist, and she's going to be chatting to us about all things fertility, nutrition, and wellbeing for women. Evelyn, I want to open the discussion with what made you become a wellbeing specialist?
So I suppose I always really had an interest in nutrition from a young age. When I was younger, I think I had I had some issues with body image and that as well. So I think through learning about nutrition, that actually really helped me overcome those issues. Obviously eating healthy, makes you feel better about yourself. And also the whole thing with me was I had to be really thin. But I think through learning about nutrition and how it affects all the different parts of your body, like your hormones, every aspect of your life, that's really what led me to become a nutritionist and to help more people to understand that link between health and nutrition as well, I suppose.
What's some of the issues that you came across with your hormones and your body image back then?
Well, to be honest, when I was younger, I think, when you're going through that phase of going from in Ireland, we have primary school and then secondary school. When you're changing schools and all of that kind of thing, you become very conscious. And I think at a certain age, you do become very conscious of your body and that kind of thing. I went to an all-girls school, so I think that probably didn't help either. I think, having that nutrition knowledge really helped me overcome, those kind of issues.
And when you work with women, well, we know we particularly work with women around fertility. What are some things that pop up when you have those consult with them? Is it more towards the nutrition side of things, or do you notice that when you start unpacking it, it comes down to body image as well?
So maybe more around the fertility side of things. I think when I unpack that, because I have a background in well-being as well, it's not always to do with the actual food side of things. A lot of the time it can be more to do with time, effort, and when I say effort, everyone's really busy. They find it easier obviously to eat out. Your work schedule can be really, really busy. So the last thing you want to do is go home and prep meals. And sometimes you might be having a bad day and you really just want to have some comfort food. You don't feel like eating a salad or, so a lot of the time I kind of more unpack those kind of issues. But yeah, you definitely do have that side of things as well, where, people, they are really focused on wanting to lose that weight as well. But actually, within the fertility side of things, if you're actively trying, that's actually probably not the best approach to lose weight. So if you are trying to conceive, you're actually probably, if you want to lose weight beforehand, you're probably better off starting that beforehand. A fertility diet is actually more about adding things to your diet. So having as much whole foods and nutrition in your diet as possible.
Let's say I'm a total idiot and I have no idea what fertility diet is or anything to do with nutrition. And I'm coming to you and going, I want to, increase my chances of fertility, not necessarily just to conceive, but my whole well-being. What would your approach be? Because, you mentioned that we tend to be lazy sometimes, and we go for more processed foods. We eat out quite a bit. I guess, it's the way the world we live in right now. But for someone who's wanting to make a conscious effort, like what does that look like for them?
So my first approach is you need to look at the overall picture. So I would always ask like my clients to go to the doctor and get like some bloods done, because I really feel like we want to make sure that there's no deficiencies there, and that can actually be some of the issues in the first place. So things like looking at your iron is a very important one. Vitamin D is a very important one. Omega-3 is important. And obviously the overall picture of everything else within your diet. So cholesterol can be really important for PCOS. So I'll have like an overall picture looking at that. I'll also ask like my client to keep a food diary for 3 days, and then I'll analyze like what they are intaking. So I have like a really good idea of their nutrition levels, if there is any deficiency. But in general, what you really want is like an anti-inflammatory diet. So along the lines of like your Mediterranean style diet. So it doesn't actually have to be a Mediterranean style, but we need to stick to the principles of the Mediterranean style diet. So obviously having more omega-3, so fatty, fish in your diet is a really, really important one. Obviously fish that doesn't have high amounts of mercury, because we obviously want to keep away from that risk. Obviously fiber is really, really important, and that's massively important for your gut. And there's a lot more research nowadays around your gut and infertility. So that's definitely something that we look at. And sometimes like if people have like issues with their gut, I might ask them to take like a probiotic. Obviously looking at prebiotic foods as well. So that is things that include like your fiber, but it can be like vegetables. So there's different types of fibers that you're intaking. That's a really, really important one, because we've actually found, and this is important obviously for anyone, this kind of diet can be taken up by anyone, but some of the research now shows that obviously our stomach is our second brain, and our stomach actually talks to our brain 80%. So like it can affect massive things, like it can affect your mood massively. So that's really, really important. Getting as much fruit and veg into your diet is really important. Definitely recommend at least having 2 serves of fruit, and trying to get veg into every meal that you can possibly. Another probably part where they've had some research is around dairy. So actually having your full fat dairy has been proven to be beneficial in fertility diet. So they're just some of the things, I suppose. I wouldn't try and obviously implement everything under the sun in the one consultation, because I don't think anyone would stick to that. So when I sit down with my clients, I literally go through what would be an easy thing to add in the first instance. So sometimes I'll just say, can you add like salmon to your diet twice a week? And like I give them really easy recipes to be able to do that. So like my best friend is an air fryer. I literally pop my fish in, and then I'll have like a salad or some roast vegetables on the side. You don't have to be creating all of these crazy meals. It's just simple, and definitely around the prep side of things, I think that saves people from falling off the wagon so much. So like dedicating maybe 2 hours on a Sunday just to prep your lunches, your breakfasts, it makes all the difference. So it does.
It's so true regarding the food and making it as convenient and easy as possible, to making sure that people still get the nutrient density into their diet, because too often we'll fall back to old habits, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the behaviors that we're so used to. And then once we start accumulating better behaviors, we notice then what's actually lacking around the nutrition side of things. And you made such a good point regarding our guts being a second brain, because again, like we hold so much in there. And we know there's a connection between a gut and also our vagina microbiome, and then there's a connection to our brain. So it makes complete sense why at times we feel so depleted, and then have to have that self-awareness going, cool, am I feeding my body enough food right now? If not, what's lacking? And having a look around that. And I love the concept of your consultations, how you're just leading the person to that low-hanging fruit option to start off small and then work your way big from there. Because like you said, sometimes if we give an overload of information, it can feel so overwhelming for a person, especially if it's their first stage of fertility. And, we don't want to make sure we scare them off. It's just like going small steps just to paint that big picture for them.
Yes, 100%. And I suppose I should actually say, like, sometimes when I talk about like a fertility diet, people actually think straight away that it's like you only do a fertility diet if you're having trouble conceiving. But that's absolutely not true. Like, a fertility diet should be taken up by any woman who's trying to conceive, and actually any partner as well. And that is a lot to do with your 1,000 days research. So like, I 100% think that anyone who is trying to conceive should look at their diet overall. So if you haven't heard about the 1,000 days research, obviously that's around the 1,000 days of the child's life. And there's actually a lot of research to show that the nutrition the child takes during that 1,000 days, so that's like pre-conception, pregnancy, and then obviously after they're born, it shows like like obviously if they have a healthy diet, they have less of a risk of diabetes, obesity, and many more chronic diseases later in life. So like, it's not obviously just for yourself, it's for your child as well. So I'm trying to like make people aware that it's not just like for people who are actually struggling to get pregnant. It should be for everyone, because the outcome is so massive. Yeah.
Let's talk about the nutrition with partners, and then I want us to dive into the during pregnancy nutrition and postpartum, because I think that's a very important part of it as well. So, when you see couples together, and too often we have this idea in our head that if a woman tends not to be fertile enough, or she experiences certain miscarriages, they usually think they're the problem. However, it takes two to tango. And too often people don't realize that we need to see the nutritional value of the partner as well, the male. So I would love to know, like, what are some things that you run by with your consultations to enhance that nutritional literacy for men as well?
100%. So you're completely correct in saying it takes two to tango, and actually all the research shows now that it's even. So that 50% issues women, 50% issues men. So, and that's something that gets forgotten about a lot. So it's really, really important. They actually released a study recently saying that in this generation, males have 50% less sperm than their grandfathers would have had. And that's due to environmental factors, things like diet changes, etc. So that's really, really an important part to look at it as well. So with the fertility type diet for males, you're looking at things like, so there is some research around your processed meats and processed foods that can obviously have like, it can cause issues with the sperm quality. So there's lots that you can do, like around like anti-inflammatory diet as well for males. And actually there's so much you can do around sperm quality. Like, nutrition is very, very like a great intervention for sperm quality. So if there is any issues with males sperm quality, they can definitely look at the anti-inflammatory diet. You can also do things like add supplements. So obviously a whole food approach is always best, but you can include things like CoQ10, which is an antioxidant nutrient. And there is a lot of research around that. The only thing is that it does take a couple of months to work. In general, when we talk about changes to the diet for fertility purposes, you need probably about 3 months, so 100 days, to make quality changes to egg quality and sperm quality, because that's actually how long they take to develop. So like, if you can, obviously it's better to even start before that, but at least giving yourself that 3 months, which, like, it's not even just for trying to conceive naturally, but you know, there's lots of people who are going down the IVF route now, and they've done research around that as well, where if you stick to, you know, the fertility diet that I've talked about, you can have an increased chance of conceiving by 40%. So that is absolutely massive. So it obviously affects things like egg quality, but also things like how, like, your chances of the child implanting and that kind of thing as well. And then obviously around the sperm being able to work effectively as well.
Information overload right now.
Sorry.
I absolutely love everything about that. And you know what? I think a lot of our listeners might be like nodding their head right now as I'm nodding mine. Like, again, like, I know quite a fair bit of this because, you know, of doing further studies myself.
Of course.
However, you made 2 really good points and had 2 questions for them. So we were talking about supplementation for males, and then you mentioned CoQ10 as an antioxidant. What is the most deficient vitamin that you see in men that they need to replenish for fertility purposes?
That probably does depend, but
or the most common?
Probably iron is up there.
Okay.
Iron, vitamin D, but I think that's probably more so to do with, you know, everyone wears sunscreen and that nowadays as well. Zinc can be another one, and zinc is obviously so important for like your reproductive health. Because zinc is basically used in like all parts of like conceiving. So it's a really important one. So they'd probably be the top ones that I would say to have a look at. I do obviously say, though, do not take supplements unless you have a deficiency. First off, like your thing, like with certain supplements, you can have toxicity risk. So you definitely want to talk to a specialist around that. But also, if you're not deficient in it, then it's actually a waste of money. So that's why I definitely say, like, in your normal nutrition, you really don't probably advise people to take supplements as much. You try and obviously do like a whole food approach, but specifically because a lot of the clients that I see are, you know, they might be a little bit older, so they're starting to, you know, want to definitely get pregnant so we try and do things that will help as much as possible, but based on research. So anything that's based on research. So that is things like your CoQ10, things like your inositol for PCOS. So that actually helps a lot with, that helps a lot with like your blood sugars and balancing all of that. So that's actually as beneficial as metformin, which is a lot of the time given by doctors, but it's obviously much better to have like that natural approach if you can. And inositol is really brilliant because that actually is a natural supplement.
I love using inositol. I swear by it, to be honest. For someone who has symptoms of PCOS, oh my God.
It's amazing. So like they've actually said, like, you know, it cuts those cravings for carbs, which can be a massive one because obviously with PCOS, it's like sugar that can't be uptaken. So like your insulin levels. So yeah, that can be really, really efficient. Yeah.
Definitely. And something that I found myself and also with clients is usually to have more of that balanced state of spike of sugar intake is not just having sugar on its own separately. I love adding in, let's say, like fats or protein with it, which that way you don't get such a high spike.
And
it makes such a big difference.
Protein is obviously so important as well, because it balances your blood sugars, it keeps you full. It's obviously needed for every single cell in your body. So I probably should have said that. I actually did a course in sports nutrition as well. So I like to kind of combine the sports nutrition stuff with the fertility nutrition stuff. So yeah, it's really interesting combination.
Yeah, so it's a good combination to see the both ends of two worlds and be able to like combine them together.
Yes. Yeah. It
makes such a big difference. My second question to you, again, I want to pretend as if I am a dummy and I have no idea about fertility. And you spoke before about how it takes 100 days for a follicle to mature and into that journey of, ovulation or menstrual cycle. And I would love for you to explain to our listeners, why is it 100 days and how does it work within the female's body?
Okay, no problem. So it takes 100 days, basically because there's so many different processes that have to happen. So basically you have all of your eggs from when you're born, and you have like your whole cycle of like basically where your body is preparing those eggs for maturation. And then so after the 100 days, you're adding your nutrition to those eggs, like they're part of your body, they're part of your cells, and that makes them up. So they take 100 days to mature, and then when they mature, then they're obviously released. And then with the sperm, it's the same thing. So they take 100 days to mature. It's like, your body is constantly building them. So obviously all of the nutrition that you put towards that is 100% the building blocks of what they are. So that's exactly why it's so important. And then obviously when the egg is released, then you want obviously the sperm to penetrate it and, then potentially get pregnant, hopefully. But there is a lot more processes. The more that I have looked into it, the more I'm like, oh my God, I think when you're younger and you're learning about reproductive health and you think like you can get pregnant anytime you have sex. That is very not true. You can get pregnant for about 5 days in your whole cycle. And there is a lot of different elements that need to come together to obviously make that happen. So, but obviously when we talk about that, like the quality, egg quality and sperm quality are the major things, because your egg may not implant. You may not implant if, the quality is poor. So yeah, like things like defragmentation in sperm can cause issues. And yeah, more so, I suppose, the quality of the egg, if there's any abnormalities and that kind of thing. So that's probably why it takes 100 days, because there's so much that has to go into those two parts. Yeah.
The body is a fascinating thing, I tell you what. And it just also opens our perception to realize that our menstrual cycles, yes, they do occur month to month, but as you mentioned, it takes 100 days for that egg to be mature enough to be able to conceive. So, for our listeners who are going, oh, wow, I didn't even realize, try and factor in what have you done over the past 100 days, and is it factoring a healthy lifestyle for you to conceive? Or even if you're not thinking of conceiving, even if you're just wanting to live a healthy lifestyle, by not having PMS, by not having cramps, by not having, those sore boobs and that lower back pain, it's just like really revert back and seeing what are your daily habits around nutrition and lifestyle.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I love talking about this.
I suppose like looking at other things like alcohol consumption, like how much exercise you do, they're really, really important. And sleep is actually one of the biggest things at the moment. There's actually, so when you try and conceive, like within your ovaries, there is melatonin receptors.
Yeah.
So it's actually been proven that you need sleep to be fertile. Like obviously everyone needs sleep, but you need good quality sleep to obviously have good quality melatonin. So that's actually another really, really important factor to everything. But sleep in general just means everything. It means, like your mental state.
Yes.
Like is a big thing. How well you eat. So it really is important.
And it's so true, because when we have a really bad night's sleep, we notice how it declines mental state, as you mentioned, and we become really moody and bitchy, and we don't want to talk to everyone. So if that's already negatively affecting us mentally, as you said, like we can just imagine how it's impacting our fertility. And but as you said, like melatonin is actually been shown to improve fertility. So why wouldn't you want to start, getting better quality sleep, or going to bed, at least half an hour early to improve that?
Yeah, definitely. And those are kind of things like you don't have to make a lot of massive changes.
Yeah,
and you will
very
see
minimal.
Big differences just from having enough sleep. And that is not just for fertility. That's like
for everyone.
Yeah, I reckon there's so many people who could do a lot more sleep.
100%. Yeah. And I think these days, I'm noticing there's a bit of a shift where a lot of people are emphasizing more about their well-being and their self-care, and the sleep quality is getting better, instead of that old mindset of going, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead,
Yeah. No.
So yeah, we don't want to wait that long, because we want to be living our lives to the fullest. And speaking of quality eggs and fertility, you mentioned before as well, talking about the nutrition side of things for when women are pregnant and postpartum as well. What are some things that you've noticed that you would love women to improve on a little bit more?
So I definitely think omega-3 is a big one, because you obviously want to get like as much omega-3 as possible. Fiber definitely is a big one. Fiber, it is probably a bit hard to get 30 grams of fiber, but if you can, that's a massive thing. Variety is also a massive one. I know obviously when we prep meals, we prep the same thing, but if you can add just one different food a day, like that can make a big difference for your gut. Protein is another big one. Obviously trying to get it from whole foods as well is probably a lot better than just supplements. They're probably the main ones that I would say. Yeah, they're probably the main ones. Vegetables, and trying to add as much as possible. Drinking water.
Yeah, you've mentioned omega-3 quite a bit in today's conversation, and we already know that comes more from fish sources or supplementation, as you mentioned, by consulting with a professional. But why why is the dietary requirement or the supplementation required for omega-3 so important for women's fertility?
It's massively inflammatory. So the more omega-3 that we have, like, it decreases our risk of a lot of chronic diseases. It's really important for the development of the baby. Like, it's massive. Like, when you think like of, like, it's really important for our brain, for our mental health. Yeah, it's just a really, there's actually a lot of research around omega-3 now, and that can be a lot of the time, that can be the issue that someone mightn't be conceiving because they don't have enough omega-3. So that's definitely a very powerful food to add to your diet in general, not even just for fertility. I think most people just aren't eating enough, like fish and other omega-3 sources.
I don't think I've had any issue with eating fish. I think it's also just being brought up with the Mediterranean diet that I just love seafood, anything to do with fish. However, I've noticed a lot of people do tend to have their setbacks with fish, whether it's like the texture or the type of fish that they eat. But I love the fact that you've stated why it's so important in terms of, you know, the health of fertility, but also like having that hormone balance as an inflammatory. I also noticed with the use of omega-3s or, you know, supplementation, I mean, through diet requirements with fish, it's been quite useful for those who suffer with menstrual cramps and period pain.
Yes, yeah. I'm pretty sure there's research that shows that with an anti-inflammatory diet, so that would include your omega-3, you have 69% less chance of ovulatory infertility. So that means basically they did research where there was ladies who weren't ovulating, and obviously to conceive you have to ovulate. And after they implemented a fertility diet, so Mediterranean style diet, 69% less chance of ovulatory failure, basically. So a lot of the women actually ended up ovulating and being like more fertile. So that's massively important. But that's obviously massively important even for people who have like PCOS, because that manages their symptoms. So it doesn't even matter if they're trying for fertility purposes, but that's massively important to balance their hormonal levels as well. And that can mean a big difference to their life, like their health and that kind of stuff as well. So really important.
Yeah, it definitely helps to regulate the menstrual cycle. And I know it's also really helpful for women who are in the stages of menopause as well. You know, for those who are experiencing like hot flashes, we already know that, again, with those type of symptoms, there will be a significant improvement with that, with the use of omega-3. And as you mentioned, because it's an it has anti-inflammatory properties. So why wouldn't you want something to improve your state of health?
And not even just that, like if people are having acne issues and facial issues, like omega-3 can be so good for your hair and skin. So like even if people aren't thinking about any of the other stuff, like it can be a really good thing to have as part of your like skin routine.
Seriously, there's so many amazing health benefits to it. I don't see why anyone would not want to have omega-3s in their diets. Hopefully everyone who's listening to this is running to the supermarket or the fish man to get some fish. What would you say? Because you mentioned before there are some better sources for omega-3s, especially because there's some of them some of them include high levels of mercury. So what are some better choices that you would recommend?
I I think salmon is a good one because most people do kind of like salmon. Tuna is actually a good source as well. Obviously, if you can get it fresh, that's better. But look, if you're on a budget and you're wanting to include some omega-3s in your diet, definitely you can use the canned versions. And then like your good quality supplements if you do not want to eat fish. So just making sure that they have good amounts of omega-3 in them, obviously, and just making sure they're good sources. Yeah. And I think you can obviously supplement with things like flaxseed. You can supplement with like algae. There's alternative ones for like obviously vegans and that as well. So it's obviously really important like for everyone to get their omegas in.
Yeah, super useful. I love that. One thing that I've been utterly obsessed with, and to be honest, it's not a recent thing, it's probably been ongoing for like a few years, is sardines. And I know some people may be like pulling their noses going, ew, that is disgusting. But you know what? Once you have a good set of sardines, whether it's canned or whether you cook it yourself, beautiful.
I love them. I love them. We grew up with them.
Yeah.
And they're so good for calcium intake as well.
Yes. You have to buy the ones with the bones in them. And this is going to gross out so many people going, oh my God, you're eating the bones. Yes. That is the best part.
Because before I moved to Australia, I probably wouldn't have been much of a fish eater, except for probably some sardines. But I think as well over here, like, you know, it just, it makes sense to like fish. I think everyone, great produce over here as well. So
definitely. I wanted us to finish up talking a little bit more around the nutrition side of things when women are postpartum. I know we covered a little bit about that, but I wanted to close today's conversation around that a little bit more, so women have an understanding how to promote more of that health side of things, not only for themselves, but also for their babies. So what are some things that you've recommended? Because we know individually it's going to be completely different to every person, but generally speaking, like what would be those recommendations for either pregnant women or postpartum?
So 100%, I would probably recommend getting a blood test done anyway in the first instance, because after you have your child, like your child strips you of a lot of nutrients, like things like your calcium levels are a really important one to look at, your iron levels. So obviously looking at the bigger picture, but in general, I would say you need to come up with a good way to prep food for yourself, because that's going to be an important one, because if you don't have food there, you will end up eating anything that you can like obviously eat easily. You want to look at nutrition that's going to help you balance your hormones, because obviously your hormones are going to be potentially disrupted, and that is that anti-inflammatory approach as well. But I would definitely say, like, have a look at your bloods just to make sure you're not deficient in anything, because the recovery time is going to be so much more longer. You're going to be tired, and if your iron and your nutrients and stuff like that aren't adequate, it's going to be way harder. So yeah, I would definitely say that try and get as much fruit and veg. Obviously it can be quite difficult. Like, I think a lot of ladies, they want to lose weight straight off, but you want to do that in a healthy way, because you want to obviously have those energy levels adequate as well. So like, I would go a more like, instead of restricting, I would just try and eat healthy. And you should obviously be able to lose weight by that. Like, so having your high protein, like we discussed earlier, having lots of veggies, as much fiber as you can fit in your diet. So they're probably the most important things. And like, not not spacing out your meals too far. We obviously want to have like protein throughout the day. So like if you are doing like exercises and you're trying to build up the muscle, because obviously the more muscle you build up, then the more calories you burn, then you want to be eating protein in like not too far apart in between. So like trying to aim for like around about 20 grams per meal, if not more. And yeah, trying to get that 30 grams of fiber, because your brain and your gut will love you for that. So they're really important ones.
Yeah, your body will definitely love you more for feeding it more food. That's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
100%.
Evelyn, thank you so much for joining me in today's episode. I know a lot of our listeners are going to get so much value from what we spoke about. And for those who are wanting to continue this journey, how can they work with you and where can they find you?
Sure. So I am on Instagram. Enhanced Fertility Nutrition is my handle. You can also go on to my website, which is www.enhancedfertilitynutrition.org. And I do actually do 100-day programs. So that's where you have actual support for that 100 days, like we spoke about earlier. And that is where I implement a lot of what we've talked today, but on a obviously individual level. So I think sometimes that is really important, because when people are on that fertility journey, they want to make sure that they are ticking all the boxes. So instead of not knowing if you're doing the right things, you have someone to obviously guide you along the way. So the program I run is called the Fertility Focus, and you can find all the information on my website. And definitely give me a follow as well if you just want to learn more about like fertility nutrition, or like about PCOS, endometriosis, or just an anti-inflammatory diet in general. I do lots of different like recipes and information and tips as well. So yeah.
Love that. Filled with free information, girls. Make sure that you give Evelyn a follow. And then if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you screenshot it, tag us at the Women's Fitness Academy. If you're a fish fan, tag me as well. I would love to see who's a sardine fan, just like myself. If it's just me, so be it. That's fine. Actually, Evelyn and I will eat sardines together.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. Take care.